The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus entered the village, where a woman whose name was Martha welcomed him. She had a sister named Mary, who sat beside the Lord at his feet, listening to him speak. Martha, burdened with much serving, came to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me by myself to do the serving? Tell her to help me." The Lord said to her in reply, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and worried about many things. There is need of only one thing. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her." The Gospel of the Lord.
The ways we greet each other vary from culture to culture and sometimes within cultures. I live in a residence hall here on campus, and I hear residents greet one another, "What's up, dude?" And I receive slightly more formal greetings from them. There is a people in the Philippines who greet one another by saying, "I smell you." I have been tempted to say this to the men in my residence hall. The olfactory challenges of living there being daunting at times. A group in Mozambique has as its standard greeting, "Are you walking well?" showing an appreciation for mobility as a cultural value among them. And then there are the Shona of southern Africa, mostly Zimbabwe, who ask, "Are you well?" And the proper response is always, "I am well if you are well." And the next question is always, "Is your family well?" And the proper response is, "My family is well if your family is well." This kind of interdependence in which one's well-being depends on the well-being of one's interlocutor, I find very beautiful. And it's interesting as a way to think about the scriptures we just heard, especially the first reading in the gospel, since hospitality and welcome is a theme linking them. Abraham and Sarah, an old couple, long resigned to not having a child of their own, welcome strangers in the desert with lavish hospitality. In response, they are promised a son who will be Isaac, through whom God's covenant will be maintained. And Jesus visits his friends Martha and Mary and his extended hospitality and welcome. And the ensuing interaction between Jesus and Martha is very interesting. In these examples among Jewish people, no doubt the greetings took one form or another of the word shalom, peace. Peace to desert strangers, peace to a familiar friend. And the shalom, the peace offered, was not only verbal, it meant food, a place to rest, conversation. Hospitality is a demanding virtue. and covers appropriate welcoming across a range of relationships, meaning different things depending on the relationships that exist between those who offer it to one another. And these two stories shed different kinds of light on the virtue of hospitality. The generous welcome given by Sarah and Abraham to those strangers in the desert reflects the abiding impulses in our faith to extend special attention to those whose needs are great, who are vulnerable, like desert travelers. In the Jewish tradition, widows, orphans, strangers were particularly singled out for care due to their vulnerability. It is painful these days to see hostility extended to strangers in so many places. Hostility condemned repeatedly by Pope Francis, by the U.S. Catholic Conference of Bishops. This kind of hostility runs against the example of Jesus, who expressed particular attention to the vulnerable of his day. And it also ignores a very basic human insight. There's a huge value to extend hospitality and care to the very vulnerable who cannot repay us. You might recall last weekend's Gospel of the Good Samaritan. The man fell victim to robbers. The priest and Levite asked themselves, what does this have to do with them? How would this affect them? And crossed over, while the despised Samaritan didn't ask, how does this affect me, but asked, what does this victim need? Anyone who appeals to us and seeks to justify our becoming more stingy or more hard-hearted is not doing us any favors. They reinforce the darker side of us, which holds back and asks, what's in this for me? How's this going to affect me? Instead of asking hospitality's question, what does this person need? Yet hospitality is more than about extreme vulnerability, of course. And each of us accords a different sort of welcome to those we know well, family members and friends. And thus the gospel gives us a different tableau. The story in Luke immediately following the Good Samaritan. Martha and Mary, Jesus' hosts, extending hospitality to their friend, their teacher, their Lord. The heart of the gospel is not hospitality in general, which does take two interesting forms, one Martha's bustle and the other Mary's close attentiveness. The heart of the gospel is, of course, in Martha's complaint about her allegedly lazy sister, and Jesus' response. Clearly, Mary's lack of help to Martha irks the older sister. Martha, like many older sisters, takes charge, makes sure things run smoothly, and is impatient with the passive, unhelpful posture of her younger sister, Mary, who listens to Jesus while Martha frets. If you're in a household somewhere or have been in a household somewhere, you might be tempted to assign to the people you live with certain roles in this tableau. Martha's and Mary's among us. Perhaps, especially if you're like an older sister, you can sympathize with Martha's indignation. Be careful, this gospel suggests, of inflating your self-importance in such a way. Resentment and indignation can be intoxicating. And Jesus repeatedly warns us against it, always counseling Pharisees not to be Pharisaical. And these kinds of habits of resentment and indignation, whether against the allegedly lazy nearby or the allegedly undeserving from far away, these kinds of habits can be hard to break. I recently read a study about scientists who analyzed the heartbeats of superb athletes. These were especially runners and swimmers who exercised 4 to 5 hours a day. They were in fantastic shape with pulse rates of about 40 or 45. And these scientists mapped the way the electronic impulses worked in their hearts. And they noticed slight differences between the athletes who exercised horizontally, swimmers, and the athletes who exercised vertically, runners. In fact, the blood and electricity went through their hearts in slightly different ways, and the only explanation these scientists could give was that the gravity operated differently because of the way they exercised, either horizontally or vertically. In the same way, I fear we can fall into easy patterns of indignation or judgmentalism to people who don't deserve our hospitality or who aren't generous enough in showing hospitality while we toil. So these readings interrogate us, friends. They interrogate us at several different levels. First, it's clear Jesus thinks all of us need to be able to sit still and listen to the Lord in quiet. We need to spend time regularly letting God love us and doing nothing else. Please take that time. Second, we should ask ourselves who it is we welcome easily and regularly, and whom we find hard to welcome, nearby or at a distance. And we should pay attention to how easy it is for our self-interest to be appealed to, our instincts for self-protection to be preyed upon by those seeking our vote or our attention span or our pocketbook. Be wary, my friends, about being sucked into a narrow world of the deserving and the undeserving, with ourselves on the predictable side of that divide. Resentments are seductive, and they are for sale everywhere, if you want to find them. Yet resentment is a dangerous place and lonely, and it's a place God's hospitality does not reflect. God's welcome extends to all, even to us. Let's welcome being welcomed by the Mighty One, and allow that overwhelming good fortune to shape how we welcome others, whether near or far.